Hello, thank you very much for joining, and welcome to the P-Tech, Q-Tech Cybersecurity Educational and Collaborative Learning Webinar Series, Session 1. That's quite a mouthful. We can move to the next slide, please. I'm Matt Sterling from Alliance Chicago, and here you also see in the slide is Michael Sangwilly from Health Choice Network, who you will be hearing from toward the end of today's session. We'll be your guides through these sessions, and we'll continue on through the beginning of next year. Go ahead to the next slide. Here you can see a high-level listing of what we have planned for the learning sessions. We're happy to have the executive leadership participating in today's session, and we hope to see their participation again in session 6 of this curriculum. In today's session, we'll be setting the stage for the importance of the annual security risk assessment, or the SRA, and in supporting the activities and around mitigating any risks that are identified in that detailed assessment that gets done. For sessions 2 through 5, we're looking forward to working with the more technical team members from each health center to dig deeper into the SRA tool in the sessions that will build on each other one after the other. So attending all the sessions is highly recommended. In sessions 2, 3, and 4, we'll unpack each of the 3 sections of the SRA tool, and in session 5, we'll put it all together and we'll discuss how the process went. In session 6, we'll then be able to meet up again all together and go over what our collective successes were along the way and share plans for any additional sessions that we have as we get into the following year. Go ahead to the next slide. So for the agenda for today, we're going through welcome and introduction. In a few moments, I'll hand off to Fred Rockman, who will share with us about why cybersecurity is important to Health Choice Network and Alliance Chicago. Following Fred's words, we'll have our keynote speaker from Microsoft share with us his perspective on the importance of a strong security risk assessment program. Then Mike will share with us a little more details of how the Learning Collaborative is going to work over the coming months. And then finally, we'll hear from Andrew Hamilton, who will share immediate next steps, and we'll close things out for the day, trying to stay within our 1 hour of the meeting schedule. Go ahead to the next slide. For meeting logistics, everyone is muted right now. You can stay muted. You can share your questions in the chat. We have folks that will be monitoring those questions, and there'll be some opportunity to answer those as we go along. I'd also like to alert you, after the Microsoft speaker, we're going to go ahead and do a poll, so keep a lookout for that. This session is being recorded, so we'll be able to revisit it later. And did want to thank everyone for participating today. And with that, I will hand off to Fred Rockman, Alliance Chicago's CEO, to kick things off. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. Could you advance the slide? So I am really thrilled to have the privilege as CEO of Alliance Chicago, and on behalf of my colleague, Alex Romeo, CEO of Health Choice Network, to welcome you all to this webinar series. I want to start out just by level setting. I don't know if anyone on the call is new to what a health center controlled network is, but really we are a strategy of HRSA to create a shared infrastructure to support health centers, to enable us in various ways to achieve a market scale, and to leverage some of the capabilities that a large health system would, but still supporting the separate independence and mission of the participating health centers. Next slide, please. This sort of highlights the value proposition here. The network kind of wraps around multiple health centers in the market in various ways, so we can do initiatives together. And this is for the purpose of both providing services and accessing services. Next slide, please. So Health Choice and Alliance Chicago are actually amongst the oldest networks in the country. We were founded in the 90s. Health Choice Network actually led the way, and we shortly followed suit, admiring the value proposition and the accomplishments that they did early on in the 90s. And throughout the decades, both networks have grown in response to need and changes in the environment to leverage that value proposition and do a variety of kinds of complementary and overlapping things for our health centers as time has gone on. And we're really thrilled. We've always enjoyed a close relationship, but we've really reinvigorated that partnership over the last couple of years. And both health center controlled networks in the new HRSA grant have deliberately aligned what we're doing in our network grants. And this webinar series today is emblematic of that. We're kind of minding our P's and Q's together here with P-Tech from Alliance Chicago and Q-Tech at Health Choice Network. Next slide, please. The two networks are really have across the networks a tremendous breadth of resources that we're leveraging together on your behalf, pooling our efforts in research, in data infrastructure, in clinical leadership and practice transformation, in various kinds of technical assistance and education, and of course, like we're on today, learning collaboratives. And we think the strength of spreading this learning collaborative across all of the health centers engaged with both networks tremendously enriches the opportunities. Next slide, please. So I put this slide up. These was early on the goals that Alliance Chicago had for health information technology, and we know they're similar for Health Choice Network. And really, a lot of these goals are around making information accessible and making sure that we have a rich set of data crossing all the settings in which our patients have been receiving care, and also making that information available across the spectrum to all of the disciplines and care team members who are providing services. Next slide, please. The problem is that as we have really made these strides in making information available, and we know our clinical teams are pushing more and more for availability of information, and they also want it to be easy. Sorry, we went a little too far here. But on the other side, the more we make information available, of course, the more risk there is that people who should not have access to that information could have access to it. So that's, of course, the concern. And in fact, now we could go on to that next slide. If we look out in the world at large, we know that the breach of information is staggering in an electronic age. Next slide, please. And unfortunately, if we look at what's going on here, we see that the breaches are scattered amongst a variety of kinds of threats, but I want to draw your attention especially to the bottom there, email. And that should make the point that really the threat of privacy and security is not something that we can isolate in the purview of just our IT assets and staff, but it's something that we all need to be extremely concerned about. Next slide, please. And of course, as you would expect from this, next slide, sorry. During coronavirus, it's actually gotten worse because unfortunately, those who have not the right to access information are taking advantage of things we're looking for, and hidden in emails that are offering us supplies or services that are relevant to coronavirus are these false threats. Next slide, please. So really the point, I'm hoping that we have lots of executive colleagues on this call, not only those staff that we have delegated the responsibility for privacy and security. Because as this slide depicts, and hopefully the point I've made is, privacy and security really penetrates to every single person within our organizations. So we really need to be mindful of what the role and vulnerabilities of all of our users are in terms of protecting our privacy and security. Next slide. So this is a shout out to all of you from the C-suite that I hope took us up on our invitation to join this first webinar, that we need to make sure that we are sponsoring the efforts that we're launching with this webinar series. We are the ones who can mobilize the organizational resources and also have the authority to reinforce accountability in some of the strategies that we're going to be developing and implementing together. Next slide. So here are some of the roles that we hope today will begin to reinforce for all of you. We as executive leaders must understand the reasons for and the organizational impact of the things we're going to be talking about. We publicly need to support these efforts. We need to really understand the point I made about the scope of privacy and security threats within our organization, and therefore how extensive the resources and commitment to provide those resources must be, and also be committed to monitoring those actions across the organization and to sustain that support. And for those on the call who are not executive leaders, I want to put myself out there to make the commitment that if you are having problems getting the right kind of sponsorship within your organization, please bring it up as we go along in the collaborative. And I and Alex pledge to help you with reinforcing these messages. So with that, I want to turn things back. And in that, I want to introduce our key speaker, Mark Ezai. Mark, I love the name of your organization, Microsoft Tech for Social Impact. And Mark is the director of Azure and Cybersecurity. He's ideally suited to be leading us through these efforts. We're really thrilled to have him here. And as you can see from his bio statement here, he's really committed to working in settings like ours. So with that, let me turn it back and proceed with the content.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it. Steph, if you wouldn't mind, just switch the slides, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is Mark Ezai. As Fred mentioned, I'm the Director of Cybersecurity and Azure with Microsoft Tech for Social Government, Tech for Social Impact under Microsoft Philanthropy. I used to, before this role, I've been Microsoft for about 15 years. Before this role, I was the Director of Cybersecurity and Cloud with Microsoft Government team, had the unfortunate position of dealing with some of the massive cybersecurity incident that happened in, within US, like, you've probably heard many of them, some of them that obviously we can't talk about, but, Atlanta, Baltimore, Merck Pharmaceutical, many of those things that I've had my teams engaged in, and there's several lessons learned and things that could be done. I've had a pleasure working with Health Choice Network for the past few months, and looking forward to working with Alliance of Chicago and see how we can improve the cybersecurity posture across the board and keep the organization focused on the mission rather than dealing with incidents that we shouldn't be. So definitely we'll talk about some of those, and of course I see my slides definitely complementary to what Fred's mentioned. Steph, if you wouldn't mind, play the video. I have a short video, just quickly play.
Earning and keeping patients' trust is essential. Trust that both their well-being and their personal information are in good hands. Patient data is under assault from a wide array of threats: external attacks, insider threats, and inadvertent data leaks. Staying secure and compliant within an ever-changing healthcare landscape is essential, but can be difficult and costly without the right partner. Microsoft 365 offers an advanced security and compliance solution to help provide improved privacy of patient data. proactive protection for patient information and access control, reduce costs from streamlined data governance. Your patients trust you to safeguard their health and well-being. A breach of data is a breach of trust. Continue to earn and help keep patients' trust with Microsoft 365.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, I think I do have control here. Excellent. All right, so as Fred mentioned, all of our healthcare leaders across the board, they strive to earn and retain patients' trust. Now, in the case of nonprofit and philanthropy organizations, there's also that aspects of donors' trust and making sure that we have all of those in control. And by providing data privacy and securing patient information and infrastructure and IT services, of course, we are providing that quality of care and reducing the cost of, IT services in general. And one of the things that I usually think about is in the, where you guys are serving your constituents and patients in this front is sometimes, there's also other consequences like in the patient data and PII information. Some of the poor patients and folks that don't have the privilege of having access to, attorneys and recovery services for, stolen identity and such. It could have a deep impact, negative impact on their lives if their data is stolen. So not only in the healthcare side of the house, but also in somebody's life when, if something bad happens and they have to recover from a stolen identity or credit issues that potentially could come from that information, disclosure problem. So one of the things that we see across the world is, there's a shifting threat landscape and happening really quickly. As we see, compared to 5-10 years ago, we see a lot more breaches happening. We see a lot more in the news on massive ransomware attacks. And what we see on the Microsoft Threat Intelligence backend network is, these threats are evolving with the speed of cloud. And of course, it's not a fair game because our customers like you guys, you don't have that much budget or resources to take away from your direct mission to put in a cybersecurity, and then now with cost of breaches exponentially going up, and then the old security model is not really keeping up with these new threats. Well, we have to rethink and see what works better. If you look at all the services that you guys today provide, you can definitely attest to a lot of these services that you have is now beyond the traditional perimeter network that used to be out there years ago. Now, and that means the entry points for the attackers are a lot more, so they have more chances. And keep in mind from statistics, we have to be 100% right all the time. The attackers only need to be right once. Not a fair fight, but what we're trying to do is level the threat landscape, level the this ground for us, and try to respond properly through partnership, through new technologies, and also continuous assessment and looking at the cybersecurity and make sure that it's part of the mission all the time and not an afterthought. And of course, what Fred said, just like we have to make sure that all of those items are in place. Statistically, what we were looking at is 81% of breaches now happen through credential theft. And some of them come through the phishing emails, the different channels, different threat avenues, but most of those is basically, it's credential theft. And that means identity is the new perimeter. And having identity under control is extremely, effective measure across different part of the organization's applications services. Plus, we see a lot of, 63% or more of employees are reusing their passwords because the lack of single sign-on, the lack of, centralized identity management, they have to do that. And this obviously creates, inefficiency. Plus, some of those passwords could be shared between the personal and corporate. And plus, when we look at some employees, there's 80% of employees use non-sanctioned applications for work that inherently creates that shadow IT type work and threat. As Fred said, stuff happens that usually leaderships don't have in their 3 to 5 years of strategic plans. One thing that unfortunate event that we had this year was COVID-19. A lot of our healthcare organizations and customers that we are serving had to quickly shift. Working from home introduces challenges, especially on the cybersecurity, that most people didn't anticipate last year, having like majority of their folks working from home or remote or in a socially distanced environment. So that brings many of these challenges. And what we want to do is working in partnership with customers like yourself to create an environment that you could have the agility and confidence from the security point of view to shift your business model and quickly turn around or course correct without impacting the security significantly, have those plan Bs ready to go. So that's really important. Now, on the Microsoft side, I know with Health Trust Network team, we've had these conversations, but just for broader audiences, I just want to bring up the unique perspective that Microsoft has within this space, within the security space. Most people don't see, in the past mainly, didn't see Microsoft as a security company. But what we have is, running the largest cloud platforms on the consumer and commercial side of the house. We get insight into trillions of signals on daily basis. One of the numbers that I always highlight with my customers is this 900 billion authentications a month, right? So there's just nobody on the planet sees this much data coming in. And our data scientists and security teams, what they do is they analyze all that, they bring them into the intelligence security graph, and then they look at the threat landscape, how it's evolving, how it's changing, how the attackers are trying to compromise our customers' credentials. Then we mitigate those through the either feature sets or other channels. And then, of course, when that happens, you as a customer and then consumer of the service would immediately take advantage of that. One of the other things I wanted to mention, and this is another little known fact about Microsoft, is when you hear in the news that FBI, local law enforcement, Interpol, Europol taking down a botnet, there's always Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, DCU, is involved in that process, because as somebody's using our IP, like Windows Desktop, Windows Server, the way that's not intended to be used, and that means cyber criminals, we have the right to go and take it back. So our attorneys and our lawyers would go with the law enforcement, we'll take those back, and then we'll sinkhole all of them back to Microsoft. That means more telemetry and insight into how these cyber criminals are trying to attack our customers' environments and citizens. So definitely, as you can see, there's so much data and insight that we have, plus our, over 1 billion investments a year in cybersecurity, and having 3,500 different global security experts that are working on your behalf and looking at threats through our cyber defense operations center in multiple different geographies. So in short, is when we are looking at the partnership, this is really important, right? So Health Trust Network, Alliance Chicago, partnering up across the board. Now with the partnership with Microsoft and Microsoft Security team, we can certainly enhance that experience and also get you guys a little bit further, because when we're looking at shared responsibility within the cloud platform, to some extent, like let's say half of it done by the Microsoft side and the other half is done by your alliance, and that means you can get closer and to the goal and target faster with the least amount of investment on your side. Now, one of the things that we talked about this is the reason about the reason we see a lot of these major attacks happen is untethered trust across different organizations, across networks within on-premises or in the cloud or within partners. So zero trust model is the model that we always assume under breach. So we don't just like relax and stay confident that we are in a better shape, or we're ahead. So we always assume that the attackers have landed, or they have a way to get in. And how do we make sure that we containerize the attackers and the landing spot and the beachhead they establish, and create that defense in depth that they would not be able to do damage to the infrastructure or gain unauthorized access to high value assets when they compromise like one user's credentials or compromise one server or one entry point. Plus, using the least privileged access, controlling that, and then verifying explicitly every request that comes in to make sure that is kosher and valid and follows our process. So on the zero trust model, we do have multiple different collateral around self-assessment and assessing yourself across multiple different components, from data to identities to infrastructure. So you can start that assessment process and see where your existing operational security posture matches the zero trust maturity model, and obviously work toward getting some of the remediation in place. From the Microsoft security point, obviously, because identity is the new perimeter, we definitely want to make sure that the identity and access management has a solid strategy and implement those and make sure we're tracking against all the best practices. Threat protection is extremely important. One of the things that we talked about is the lack of all the resources. We don't have an army of security folks on your side to manage security and monitor 24/7 and do all that work. What we need to do is reduce the fatigue on all the signals that are coming in by using and better usage of AI, machine learning, behavior analytics, and automation that is built into the tool sets, or could be done with deliberate customization, depends on your existing business processes and the response. Plus, looking at what sensitive data is out there, patient data, correctly categorize and classify the data, and start looking at, first assess and then, start encrypting them wherever they are. That means, if they leak out, you have, even if they're outside of your perimeters, you keep control of those and tag and encrypt or expire, or if you need to, at the same time, have the safeguards to secure all your assets within the cloud platform or even on-prem. What we've seen is increase in the past year, a 300% increase on the identity attacks. And that's where like use of Azure Active Directory and Office 365 on the back-end identity would give you guys real-time detection of threats. And then, like with the conditional access and all the other components built into the Azure Active Directory, being able to automatically remediate and stay connected to the backend intelligence security graph on the Microsoft side would give you confidence to, respond to anything that changing threats. One thing that Fred mentioned is COVID-19, right? So when COVID-19 happened, we saw a ton of different new campaigns that started on that front. What we did was we open sourced and released all the threat hunting techniques that our customers could use to find out if there's a campaign happening on their emails and how to detect and block those and respond. This is something you probably heard many times, but it's extremely important. Multi-factor authentication. While Microsoft is moving into passwordless, and we've done the transition, even if you're not in passwordless, multi-factor authentication is extremely important. As you can see, statistically, 99.9% of identity attacks could be prevented by having MFA in place. There are campaigns that are happening, and I've seen that sometimes, there's no tool that can prevent the user from handing over their credentials to the attacker. But the nice thing about it is if there's MFA, then it's not going to make any difference. You can have my credentials today, but because I'm using multi-factor authentication across all of the assets that we have, those credentials are not useless unless there's the device and Face ID and all those things invoked. So it's really important. Plus, one of the other things that Fred mentioned was balance, and this is extremely important. We don't want to bog down doctors, nurses, and all the other users of your IT systems by constantly doing a second factor authentication and bugging them on those fronts. So the use of conditional access, we can establish a baseline risk factor for any connections that are coming in. And by the use of behavior analytics and AI, we determine the risk factor and understand that okay, so this is a doctor that's coming in from on-premises. Everything, the device is checked, everything is checked, everything looks normal through this process. We're not going to bog down the doctor or nurse by having a second factor authentication. But as soon as we detect, let's say, that the request comes from a anonymizer, Tor browser, or something that we can't validate the integrity of the request, then we can invoke MFA, we can limit access and block access. So just using technology to create that balance that detects the real threat, and then when there's no threat and everything looks great, we would just let the user do their daily job and daily work. So this is just a slide for your reference that doesn't matter what device we're using, Microsoft, non-Microsoft, and what other services, cloud app services, and others that's being used. This conditional access and identity system could be applied and work for you guys to secure that connection and the entry point and the new perimeter that you have. Now, one other thing I want to mention was through Azure Active Directory, the challenge that historically has been like when you partner up, let's say two partnership or other healthcare partners and patients access with their identity. It's been extremely challenging, and sometimes some of the workaround between organizational trust establishment could create more risk rather than really solve the problem. So with the Azure Active Directory B2B and B2C, we have solved the problem of secure access and federation between partner organizations and the resources. You can control those access by also your own policies and second factor authentication and such. Plus, bringing patients into the system by using the B2C and even like relying on their social identities if it needs to, but enforcing additional policies as doable. So we see a lot of our customers are now moving toward using these, new identities in place. We talked about MFA, we talked about, balanced access and all of those. One of the things I want to hit also, and we talked about the automation too, controlling and assessing legacy authentications that are being used within the infrastructure and applications is important because not having that assessment and visibility into what old protocols are being used, this is where WannaCry happen, right? So being able to understand where they are, manage those, risk manage or move away from them is extremely important, and we would highly recommend keeping an eye on the assessment phase and keeping an eye on that and continuous assess what becomes legacy or what is to become legacy soon, so you can have a plan for those. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, we talked about the shadow IT and all those 80% of workers using non-sanctioned applications and cloud apps within the organizations. That is where when you use Microsoft 365 Cloud App Security, you can certainly from the assessment phase, you can run it even in trial mode or on a audit mode and get a better understanding that what third party or what other cloud apps are being used within the organization, and then have a plan on what are we going to do with this, create a sanction this, integrate single sign-on with Azure Active Directory, and then give users access. Plus, a lot of these, as you could probably know, could be a source of transferring data to outside world, because if somebody's got box.com, for instance, nothing wrong with box.com, but what happens is you can transfer data out of the organization by dropping stuff in box.com, and the firewall with your perimeter can't really protect that. So we need somebody that can look into it, look at the data or compliance that is being used by that application and put a better control over it. First phase, what we talked about an assessment, you can use the tool set to assess and gain better insight in what's going on. And also like some of the threat activities like ransomware activities and others that could be detected by the tool set. Now in second phase, you can certainly use Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps and others to automate the response and then provide some consistency around how do we deal with this threat when it shows up, or when Cloud App Security generates a new alert, what do we do from Azure Active Directory, and that automated response would help you get in front of these as fast as possible. And sometimes, just like when it's after hours and nobody's out there, nobody's watching, you can get in front of it by holding the attackers back and not letting them have another 8 hours before somebody gets to it. And then, obviously that would be included in the process of like a response in the SOC or security team, and make it easier for them to start looking at or responding. So in this case, when there's an example, the alert came in, the security team would have an option to immediately disable the account, or the system could do it automatically. So it's just, this is all aligned with the business processes that you guys have. So I'm sure everyone knows about the compliance assessment and what you can do ongoing risk assessment on the compliance side of the house. But one of the things that I would highly recommend, and this is a feature that everyone loves within Microsoft platform across the board, is our Secure Score platform. So with the Secure Score platform, it gives you a view of where you are compared to your other organizations like yourself, your peers and others. And then it would give you prescriptive guidance on where to start and how to start. So with the Microsoft Secure Score, we would look at the device compliance, we would look at the Office 365, Mail, others, and start, giving you guidelines on where to start, which one of these items would give you a better bang for the buck, and you can start prioritizing based on that. Obviously, there could be other stuff that you would be doing a part of the strategy, but this is a great starting point, and a lot of our customers love it because at least they have a clear path to becoming more compliant and understand the risk at the same time too. One of the other items we talked about was that data classification and DLP that you can start. One of the, from the assessment point of view, and understands a lot of these things that we're talking today is on the assessment fees, is because Microsoft follows NIST protocol, and NIST obviously includes assess, protect, detect, response, and recover. A lot of our tool sets at the same time would give you the opportunity to do an assessment. That means like for data classification and Microsoft information protection and such, you would be able to run that in audit mode and start discovering what type of data is being used out there, and then put your plan in place, that classification and encryption, and then also use the advanced e-discovery and such within the Microsoft platform. You always have access to audit logs and alert about information monitoring, what kind of sensitive information, critical data is being handled. At the same time, for the transparency of working with Microsoft support, using the lockbox feature within Microsoft 365 would also give you peace of mind that when the data, if the data needs to be accessed because you need some sort of support, the process of lockboxing and second factor authentication and multiple approvals and all those is been followed properly, and that would give your customers and your end users confidence that the data is handled properly based on your guidelines and policies. You've probably seen many different iterations of Microsoft compliance on the cloud side of the house, Microsoft 365, Azure, Dynamics 365. The thing that you mostly be interested are, HIPAA, high tech, high trust, probably GDPR, but one of the things that is a given when you're using this platform, you are also inheriting some of the other good work that Microsoft Cloud Team is doing. Like let's say, for instance, FedRAMP. Microsoft commercial clouds are also FedRAMP High certified. So while historically it's been expensive for our customers to look at anything other than what they actually had to do, now you're taking advantage of that platform that's already compliant with higher compliance metrics, and you're riding off of that. So definitely a lot of value there that I see. It's important. Now on the infrastructure and data center side of the house, understand like not everyone within this forum uses Azure. Health Service Network definitely uses Azure, but Azure also gives tool sets to do the infrastructure monitoring and assessment, vulnerability assessment, management, and recommendations, prescriptive guidance. The nice thing about Azure Security Center is it's not just for Azure, it's hybrid, and it could be used for on-prem VMs and virtual machines and network and assets, even assets in other clouds. So definitely an opportunity to do the same thing we talked about, Secure Score from Microsoft 365 and Office 365 on the backend infrastructure, and then start like looking at what are the items that we can remediate and gives us most increase in the security and operational operational posture. Now everything we do in the Microsoft, we believe in encrypting at rest, in transition, in transit, and in use. And we try to make sure that from the compliance point of view, we also use like Azure Security Center to comply and assess continuous assessment of that compliance, and look at where those deviations happens and how we can quickly go back and go back to compliance. So definitely the tool sets that are available to you would get you a lot of understanding of where you are today from the infrastructure point of view, and then basically go back to that remediation phase and stay within compliance. Some of them are regulatory compliance, some of them are your own that you define, and the vision that leadership has. So definitely something that to consider there. Now, this is again just looking at Gartner Magic Quadrant, where Microsoft is across the board with all of these security, information protection, and ADR. As you can see, we're in the leaderboard across the board, and definitely something that to consider. So partnership, as I said, is extremely important. We do believe in using the technology to advance your security, but we also understand and believe in the people process aspect of this, and making sure that from the IT and from the IT side of the house, people process and service management is placed, also awareness for the users and helping them better respond, or at least be aware of the threats that are evolving out there. So I think I'm at time, and so we did have one other video that, if we have time, we can play. I guess, Stephanie, I would just give it back to you, see if you can, just that's another minute of video. Otherwise, I'm done. I appreciate everyone.
At St. Luke's, we have about 15,000 employees, roughly around 30,000 phones. And with over 1 million records, keeping our patient information safe is paramount, and Microsoft is helping us do that.
We need to understand who is accessing our data at all points and how it's being encrypted. At first, it was great to have different threat intelligence that we could rely on so that you're never truly just relying on one. However, it put our analysts in a place where it's incredibly time-consuming.
There was actually 22 different systems that they had to go into on a day-to-day basis to be able to ensure that the network is being protected. It was daunting. Our ability to tell our senior leadership what truly was going on in the network would take us a month to 2 months. Now it could be days, hours, and even sometimes minutes.
We have Azure Advanced Threat Protection. We have O365 ATP, and then we also have Microsoft Cloud Application Security. For all those alerts to be in one centralized place, it allows them to not only investigate it, but confirm that it occurred and then handle it accordingly.
Being able to understand the data much more accurately is huge for us to be able to deal with all the threats that come into the organization.
We need to make sure that our patient information is protected. We have to be HIPAA compliant.
Having products that come right out of the gate with HIPAA rules that all we need to do is check a box is remarkable.
Intune has really been developed to ensure that the information that's on an individual's personal device isn't affected. However, the stuff that we've given them, those systems that have confidential data, we can pull it right off of their phone, and it's really a good user experience for the employee.
Microsoft 365 has made it incredibly easier and really free up some time for other things that we'd like to do.
The morale of my team has gone up exponentially. They get more and more excited as they come into work every day. They're coming to me and saying, we're getting this data much faster, we're able to use this data much easier, we're not losing anything behind it, we're actually gaining much more security than we ever thought. It's been amazing to see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for that information. Hi, everybody. This is Michael Sangili. I work with Health Choice Network, part of the CISO team. Matt introduced me in the beginning. I will be covering over the learning collaborative of exactly what we're going to be covering throughout this whole webinar series. It'll be Matt and myself, so you all will really get to know Matt and I as we go throughout this whole learning collaborative. So I wanted to break down a little bit exactly what we're going to be talking over this collaborative. I know security risk assessment can be a very tough thing because there's so many moving parts to put together in here. So we're hoping with the knowledge we've gotten and we've seen throughout many organizations that we can put this all together so that everyone can go ahead and perform their own security risk assessment within their organization. Next slide, please. So Matt covered this briefly, but I'll just cover it again. Today's the kickoff call. Sessions 2, 3, 4, and actually 5 are going to be more around the SRA tool. We're going to be diving deeper into the technical sections and more of the administrative sections as well. And then session 6, we're going to be wrapping it up, reviewing the reports, and hopefully everyone has it completed. Also, I want to throw up a quick poll for everyone. We wanted to see, before we get this kicked off and describe all the sessions, we wanted to see who in this group here has actually completed their SRA within the last year. Stephanie, can you please put up that poll? Yes, so how many of you here have completed your security risk assessment within the last year? Yes, no, or not sure. I know it can be a tough question sometimes, or maybe it was completed several years ago and you haven't touched it yet. So just go ahead and answer that question and we'll give you a minute. All right, I think that's enough time. Great. All right. So over 50% of you have completed it within the last year. That's actually a great number. I know this is a very tough thing. There's so many moving parts to this. We understand and we see it all the time. And for those of you that are not sure or haven't, this is perfect. So we're going to educate everybody on how to do this so that you can learn from it here and at the same time use this as the opportunity to complete it now. Instead of just watching along, we're actually going to dive deep into the tool. We're going to use the tool and we're actually going to all work together. And month by month, we'll complete section by section so that hopefully by the end of this webinar series, you will have your own completed SRA for your organization. You can take back to your leaders and show them and just be a little more at rest that if anything were to happen, any kind of HIPAA regulations or issues, you have your own SRA to produce and show a report. Next slide, please. One more. There we go. So we're going to begin the next session, which is going to be session 2. We're going to dive right into the SRA tool 3.1. This is a free tool provided by HHS. It's widely used. There's many tools out there. Most of them cost money to use. The great thing about this one is it's free. It's very easy to use. It's simple and it lays it out for you. Some of you may already be using this. We see some organizations that we've been to that are already using this. If you are, great. We'll show you a little few tricks and explain certain sections of it that'll help you break it down a little more. So in this section, we're going to cover what is the SRA tool, how to use it, how to go back and forth. There's several little things in there that you got to kind of understand. And then we're going to take the first step and dive right into it and actually put in your practice information and just end that session with that one, just kind of an overview of the actual tool. Next slide. So here on session 3, we're going to talk about the SRA basics and security policy. This SRA tool is broken down into 7 assessment sections. So each session, we're going to cover a different section. So here we're going to cover assessment sections 1 and 2, which talk about your general security risk assessment practices, HIPAA security regulations. So you'll get questions such as, have you completed an SRA in the past? Is your SRA up to date right now? How often do you review it? And then it'll also break down into your key security policies. Do you have these listed security policies? How often do you update your security policies? So it'll bring down questions like that. We'll show you how to answer those questions. If you don't have some of this information, we'll show you how to obtain the information. So we'll cover all of that in those 2 sections. Next slide, please. So in session 4, we're going to cover security and the workforce and security and data. These are assessment sections 3 and 4. We're going to be doing things like identifying key SRA personnel. So as you're completing your SRA, it's not just going to be an IT thing. A lot of people think this is just an IT thing, but it's not. It actually involves the whole organization. You're going to need to go sit with the heads of each department and speak to them and ask them, how does EPHI traverse through their environment? Do they use software? Do they handle it physically? These are the questions that are going to appear in your SRA, and these are questions you need to be able to answer so that you know how EPHI is flowing through your organization. Another big topic here, which is workforce and security, covers security awareness training. This is more of a recent addition to an SRA and a requirement from HIPAA, but security awareness training amongst your organization is very important, whether you use software, whether you have someone speaking about it. It's just required in a way where your organization has to be brought aware of different security threats, such as phishing or phishing exercises, viruses. It's bringing it now that everyone needs to understand how this works, because it's not just a task on the IT department. This is a task for everybody to be aware of all the threats that are out there and be able to stop them as they see them. And then the last piece is EPHI access management. So here we're going to discuss how and where and who is accessing EPHI and go over each of those sections. Next slide, please. So in session 5, we're going to cover security in the practice, security in the BA, and contingency planning. This is going to be the last sections, which is 5, 6, and 7. They're a little smaller, so we'll be able to cram them into one section. This is going to cover EPHI and the term CIA. This stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You'll hear that term a lot. It's very common in the security field. This essentially means, is your EPHI confidential? So is it encrypted? Is it being given out anywhere else? Where's your EPHI sitting? The integrity means, is your EPHI secure? Can it be altered in any way? Is it sitting inside a folder that somebody can go in and manipulate that file? And availability, is your EPHI always available to the patient? If your system goes down, do you have some sort of backup? So those are the questions you'll come across. And then managing your business associates. We're going to talk a lot about business associates and covered entities and discuss the differences. So we'll go over an entire section that's going to have an area for you to add all your business associates and describe exactly what they are. And then contingency planning 101. Here is where we are going to break down any contingency plans that your organization may have, which is a requirement by HIPAA, to make sure that you have backups in case of anything going wrong. Mark talked about ransomware. That's a very specific area that pops up a lot throughout this. So just make sure you have some sort of contingency plan. Next slide. And session 6, this is where we're going to finally be completed our SRA. We're going to spit out a report at the end from the whole SRA tool. We're going to review the report. We're going to talk about it, go over some of the results, and talk about best practices on how to manage your reports. This isn't a report that you just generate and then we don't touch for years to come. You actually consistently should always update this SRA, whether it be annually or whether it be when a big change is made in your environment. Let's say you bring on a new vendor. At that point, you should be updating your SRA. I know we're running a little short on time, so we're gonna wrap it up now. Next slide, please. So what's next? I'll pass it over to Andrew. He is the CIO at Alliance, and he will be covering all the next topics, and we look forward to working with you soon. Andrew, go ahead. I think Andrew might be, oh, there he is.
I think he's unmuted now. Andrew, are you with us?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me
Okay.
now?
Yes.
All right. Thanks all so much. I want to thank Michael and Matt, especially putting today's kickoff session together. And of course, Fred, our CEO. I know he also sends greetings from Alex, the CEO of Health Choice Network. Thanks you all for joining the session today. And as you heard, please make sure you have your teams registered for the remaining sessions, so that we can move through all of the content in the security risk assessment process. And then finally, we'll all come back together and do a review of what we've learned and where we want to go after this first series is complete. Just a quick reminder that there won't be any homework planned for the first upcoming sessions, but the subsequent meetings certainly will have working sessions in between the content that we'll be sharing, which is why we separated the time between each session to give each team ample opportunity to do some of the work in between each of the learning sessions. Finally, I want to thank our colleague from Microsoft for joining us today and helping make the case for investing in and supporting efforts around developing more awareness related to security threats in the healthcare environment, and also some of the tools that are available to help augment the work that we will have going forward once we've completed our risk assessment process. Finally, I want to thank the team from Health Choice Network, Alliance Chicago, including our colleagues from the Illinois Primary Care Association, Gracie, and PTech and QTech teams for helping put this session together. And with that, I hope everyone has a really good day and rest of your week. And thanks again for joining us. We look forward to working with you to mitigate privacy and security risks. Thanks so much.